So in preparation for putting the meter back in place, meter cord and so forth, all that tricky stuff, first I've just got to do a couple of little jobs. One is I want to put a couple of drops of lacquer here to discourage that screw from loosening up. Of course that's underneath the meter, so this is the last chance to do anything about things like that. I want to check that the screws up here are all tight. What's that bit of fluff there? What's that? Don't know. Not important. Now, down here, got this sliding pulley here. That's to tension our cord. Later cameras had a swinging arm with a spring to do that job. I've got to decide now whether to leave this as is or whether to alter it to match the later cameras. Obviously if it was sprung loaded it means that there'd be the same tension on the cord regardless of any slight movement, and if it's fixed then if anything moves then the cord would be looser or potentially too tight. I think we'll leave that as is. We'll slide that pulley up to the top, which is its slack position if you like, and we'll slide it back down to put the tension on there as required. I'll show you a camera body with the alternative arrangement. Actually I can do better than that. I can show you two alternative arrangements. This one. Here you see we've got the pulley. It slides up and down, but they've used a spring to keep the tension on this pulley, to pull that pulley down. That's pretty unusual. I don't know when I last saw one like that, but this is a 3S body shell. This is the more common arrangement. Now this is actually a Reflex S, but it's the same arrangement for this meter cord. Actually this is a Reflex 3, I'm lying. This one's got an extra screw here, but this is the same arrangement here. It has a pulley on an arm with a spring at this point, and that spring acts to pull the pulley down, which would tension the cord. This is a Reflex 3. Now one of the things they did with the Reflex 3 was they put an extra screw here which serves to stop the cord from being able to fall off this pulley, which is a handy trick. So there you go. But that's the three different sorts of tensioner you will find. The one we're dealing with today, of course, is this one, which is a fixed tensioner. And you can see from the screw head mark there that that was fully tensioned previously. That was pulled right down to the lowest position and locks down there. Now I checked the cord, and the cord was probably, it may have stretched, but it was certainly longer than the number that I have got for the length of the cord. Okay, so that part we need to take into account. Anything else I need to have in at the top of the body here? Well, a little bit of synthetic grease wouldn't hurt up here. We've already got some on the cocking rack. I'm just putting a bit in here so that it runs round under this point. And if we need any on the top there, probably can't hurt. Okay, just check that that rolls in nicely. That's good. I think that part's good to go. Next up, the meter has to go on, of course. The meter can only go on if the shutter release and the film release are in place. So I'll just run some molybdenum paste on that shutter release shaft. fit its return spring, which is the shorter of the two springs that look much like this. Where this cutout is on here, I'll just run a bit on there. That's where this arm runs against the back of this. So that just sits in the body just like that. That's in the front hole, of course. The film release button, I'll run some molybdenum paste up the centre of that. This has the longer of the two screws, and this fits over that post there. Now if those aren't in place, it's pointless putting the meter in place because they're extremely hard to wriggle in if your meter is already there. So the meter, do I need to do anything to this? Well, I've already looked at the meter, it appears to work. How accurate it is pretty much undetermined. Some of them still work quite well, some of them don't. Here I'm just clearing away any old grease. I'm using Naphtha here, but you wouldn't want to use it for too long. That plastic doesn't particularly enjoy it, and you wouldn't want to be splashing it about. And whatever you do, don't get any solvent on that window at the front, because that really does not like solvent. You'll often see these cameras where that window, instead of being a nice shiny look like that, is just dull and translucent, and that's because somebody cleaned it with something inappropriate, and it's just messed up the finish of the plastic. Can you polish that out? Yeah, with lots and lots of work you can, but you know, the honeycomb effect would certainly be half gone by the time you get it sorted out. Okay, so we've got our meter and we've got the body. We can put the meter in place. In this case, there's a little tab on the back of the meter. It hooks under a notch in this arm here. There's a little post on the bottom of the meter which drops into holes in the top of the body here, which locates it firmly. And it does take some wriggling to get this thing seated sometimes. Yeah, that's just dropped in there. To get the meter cord and everything in place, well, all our settings are going to be made with this at ASA 10. So I'm holding down the centre of that disc there, swing this round to ASA 10. Why do we use that? Just because that's where all the instructions say to start, and you need some fixed point of reference. That's a good place. Let's just pop back up to about ASA 15. Let's get that wriggled in place properly. That's better. And the meter needle is going to start right back in that left hand corner there. Something like that. Next, the exciting business of the meter cord. Here is the original cord. This one, I've looked at it. It appears to be in good order. There's probably no reason to think that wouldn't go another decade or 2 decades of useful service. What was this made out of? Well, quite possibly it was silk. It's tightly woven. It's very strong. Strong enough to do its job. You can snap them. They'll die from a number of reasons. They'll die because they've been running over a sharp edge somewhere because the cord's not been laid out correctly. It's not running over pulleys correctly, or it's for some other reason it's been physically damaged, and that may fray it and cause it to weaken and then snap. Possibly the most common cause of failure is people mucking with the camera. How you go about doing that is you have to change the positions of the front rings on the shutter. The front control rings on the shutter control how far the meter drum can rotate in either direction. And they limit it. They limit it beyond the point where you would have a problem with your cord coming to the end of its tether. But if someone has moved those front rings, put them back in the wrong place, you'll get to the situation where the front rings will move beyond the point where the cord is able to move. And in that case, something's going to give, and it's probably going to be the cord. So as I say, this cord's probably good, but I'm not going to reuse it. I've got a new one here ready to go. Now this material here is some sort of fishing line. It's some man-made material. It's loosely woven by the looks of it. It may be Kevlar, something like that. It's something super duper. It's got no stretch in it to speak of. And I make my own up. Where do I get it? One of my neighbours, I was speaking to him one sunny morning and he was sorting out his fishing gear. And there on the ground on his driveway next to his gear was this tangled mess. And he was just about to throw it out. Now I don't know how he managed to get it into such a mess, but one way or another, getting it on or off his rod, off the spool, he tangled this into a useless mess. Now there's no stretch in this stuff, it's exceptionally hard to deal with. But I instantly saw it as a useful resource because it's about the right diameter and this stuff looks like something you'd be doing your teeth with. But this is really, really strong. So this tangled mess here has served me well for probably 20 years now. It's providing me with all the cord I need for restringing meters. It's always a job and a half to try and get a long enough piece out of this bundle in order to make a replacement cord. But I've got one here ready to go. I made that up just earlier. I'll show you how I go about tying those things up. So first I start with a long enough piece of cord and I tie a double knot in it. Now the main reason I'm tying a double knot is so that the knot is physically big enough that it'll lodge in the drums, in the slots in the drums, and won't pull through. Because if it pulled through when it got to the end, that would be a nuisance. But a double knot here is just the right size. So I'll start with my double knot like that. Then I need my measurement to where I'm placing the next knot. And fortunately, in the service manual for the Retina IIIS camera, cord length 18 1/4 inches. Now that's the distance from knot to knot. That converts to 464 millimeters. I've checked the German manual, that doesn't tell you what distance there is between the knots because presumably you're just buying replacement cords ready-made. But 464 millimeters is the distance there, or 18 1/4 inches between the knots. So all I do is find a tape measure. All I do is start with my first knot at 0, run my cord out 464 millimeters, mark that with a pen, and that's where I want my other knot. Take that off there, get the cord out the way. I want to cut that excess off because I don't want to be fighting with more of this stuff than I need. So I'll just cut that off. Here I'm using a scalpel. Just leave enough on the end that you've got a handy bit to hang on to. And then I need to tie my knot into here. And of course it's the same as at the other end, except now we've got a physical place we actually want this thing to end up. Which makes this just a little bit more awkward. So if I slide this knot along till I've got my black mark forming right about in the middle of that knot, just like that. And I do that thing up nice and tight. There I've got my knot falling in the middle of that black mark I'd made. So next up, what do we do with this? Well, we want the excess off the end, so I'm cutting that back to probably within 5 millimeters, 3/16 of an inch of the knots. We don't want a long tail hanging on the end. I take some lacquer. I want to lock these knots to make sure that there's no slippage, that the knot can't fall apart. So I'll take some lacquer, just put that on the knot at that end. Do the same there. Let that stuff dry, which this thing is only going to take a couple of minutes, and then that cord will be ready to use. So how is the cord arranged? Well, here is a sketch of the cord as it will wrap around the meter drum at the top of the camera. So you can see here that the cord, the lowest part of the cord starts here, rolls around that meter drum twice. From the bottom it passes, or from here it passes to the lower part roller at the front of the camera, and from the lower roller at the front of the camera it passes to the front roller that drops the cord down into the body. And likewise its mate comes around here to the top roller, and that passes to the rear roller here. Where does it go after that? Okay, so we get down to this. Our cord from the front roller tracks down to the front pulley in the camera body, and from the front pulley in the camera body it tracks down to the underside of the drum. It wraps round the drum there 3/4 of a turn, stopping at the front. So the knot has to be in the front position. Now all this is where it's going to be with our meter set to ASA 10, our shutter speed set to f1. To an B, and the shutter aperture set to f1.9. With the front ring set in the B and f1.9 settings, that's on the shutter at the front of the camera, this is where the meter drum will be. That cord will be in those positions, and at the top of the camera our meter needle is going to start somewhere here, near here at the rear position. But we haven't set the position of the drum yet, that's to be done later. If the cord's attached to the drum already, well, that's simpler in one way and more complicated in another. It's simpler in that everything should just fall neatly into place, presuming it was set correctly last time, which of course isn't always the case. So, armed with my drawing, I can start putting this meter cord in place. I can start putting this cord in place. Now, something to keep in mind at all times is there's nothing holding this meter down. It's not clamped down, it's clipped in. It'll be disturbed if you do anything silly with it. So keep that in mind, because if that swings free, you'll lose the tension on your cord. The cord will fall off the pulleys and you'll have to put everything back. I'm going to start here with the lower cable drum. I'm just putting a bit of synthetic grease through the centre of that. That's going to sit on this post right here. So starting with this cord, let's start here. So I've got my meter set to ASA 10. The needle, the follower needle, is somewhere off in this back corner, and we'll get this cord in place. So which way do I want to go? I want to go this way. So I'll pull that down past the roller, once round the drum, past the roller again, making sure this cord stays in the upper position, and I can bring my cords round to the front, whereupon they have to go over this pulley. Now I'm just checking to make sure that I've got that correct. The lower cord goes to the front pulley here. That's correct. So I've got that sorted out so far. Now I've got to get the cord down through the body here. I've got a piece of wire here, which is just handy for hooking onto things like cables and pulling that through the hole. And I'll keep some tension on those pieces of cord. So at the moment everything is seated as it should be on the cable drum at the top. Getting that cord seated down and it's grooved properly there. And we have the cord passing through into the body at the bottom of the camera here. Got to keep these cords parallel, making sure I don't swap them over, that they're not crossing each other. And obviously they've got to go into their respective pulleys at the base here. Now I'm looking closely to make sure that they're not running in the same pulley. They appear that they might be, because if they're running in the same pulley there'll be an awful lot of friction there as the cord is going in two directions, chafing against each other. So there I have my cord in place. Now there's nothing to hold this here. There's no extra screw as there is in the later cameras. I've got to get this cord onto my drum. Now checking this, I can see that I'm just going to drag this cord back a bit. I want my shorter piece in the front position. So this is just, I'm just holding tension on this. I'm dragging the cord back out of the way so that my shorter piece of cord is in the front position on the front pulley here, just so it more closely matches the picture I'm trying to copy. Here's a drum. It's got two slots in it. That's where the knots are going to go. We're interested in getting the front piece of cord in place. So holding that carefully, I'll get that in there so that the knot's trapped in the drum, and the cord has to wrap around the bottom of the drum. Of course these pieces of cord are falling off the pulleys as I speak, so just trying to keep some tension on this. I'll put that temporarily back in place so you can see what I've achieved. Let's get that cord seated there. Set. Now that's fallen off, the cord's just got tangled behind the drum. Let me just get that straightened out. Okay, so there's the cord on the drum. That's on the front position, and the cord wraps around that drum, round here, and goes into a slot here. So we've got about 3/4 of a turn on there. I've got to get the other cord onto the drum. It goes into the opposite slot, and it winds around the other way. So this cord has to go around the drum in a clockwise direction. And this is where it gets tedious. So I'll hold that in one hand. Look, this is already falling off the pulleys at the top here now. And the cord at the bottom here which is on the lower of the two pulleys, like that. Starts here in the slot there and rolls around that drum a couple of turns. See if I've got enough. It looks a bit long to me. Let's go around once more. Nope, I've made a mess of it. I'm going to have to start again. I'm going to make it easier on myself here. I'm just going to clamp this cord loosely in place at the top so it can't unwrap from the drum at the top while I'm working on it. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take a couple of washers and a screw and I'm going to clamp it at this point. This is a method that you can use to change the meter at the top of the camera without disassembling the whole camera. Can it be done? Yes, it can be done. I've done it before. Should you attempt to do it with the expectation of success? No. It's awkward as hell. You may be able to achieve it. You probably won't. It's always much easier if you're changing the meter just to bite the bullet, take the camera apart, have the whole front off, get the meter in place that way. Meanwhile, let me get this cord clamped.